As the next in our distinguished lineup this afternoon, I'm very happy to introduce Elizabeth Lyle, Special Counsel for Innovation in the Wireless Telecommunications Bureau of the Federal Communications Commission. Elizabeth has a long record of work on technology and disability, including leading the discussion of access for people with disabilities in the recently released National Broadband Plan. She's been a key participant in our efforts here on the implications of cloud computing for people with disabilities, about which you will hear more later this afternoon, work that we was organized jointly by the Coleman Institute and the Silicon Flatiron Center for Technology, Law, and Entrepreneurship. It's been a great pleasure for us at the university to work with Elizabeth on this project, and we're delighted that she has agreed to share her perspective with our audience here at the conference. Elizabeth?
Thank you very much. Thank you very much, Clayton. Clayton's been terrific to work with over the last few months, and I feel really lucky that we've had a chance to work so closely together. It's a true pleasure to be here today. I first got involved with the Coleman Institute when Dale Hatfield, the executive director of Silicon Flatirons, asked me to come out for a planning session that was held in July. Now, Dale and I have worked together for, years ago at the FCC, over a decade ago. Let me just say he's one of my heroes. So when he asked me to fly across the country in the middle of my summer vacation for a 4-hour meeting, of course, I said yes. And you know what? I am really glad that I did. I have learned a tremendous amount, not only from Bill Coleman. I mean, what a fabulous presentation he gave yesterday, and he was really great in July as well. But from Clayton, my friend, and David Braddock, and Eden Abrowitz, but you know, more than the Coleman Institute people, I mean, in addition to that, just all the fabulous people they've brought together, who are, you know, everyone who's just very committed to empowering people with cognitive disabilities and using all the tools of our broadband age. And you know, the partnerships that the Coleman Institute is fostering are critical to moving this endeavor forward. Accessibility and technology issues are complex, and it takes all of us, whether we're, you know, advocates or people with disabilities or parents and caregivers or technologists or policymakers or academics or industry representatives. It's going to take all of us to solve these problems and to move forward. So the power of partnerships is a truly apt name for this conference, and thank you for inviting me to be part of this. You are making a difference. I recently, as Clayton said, had the chance to work on the accessibility recommendations in the National Broadband Plan for the Federal Communications, which they released in March of this year. You're probably saying, what is the National Broadband Plan? Well, you know, last year in the Recovery Act, the stimulus bill, the bill that has enabled the building of so many roads and bridges across the country and engendered so many traffic jams, was also allowed us, also one of the things that Congress asked us to do, the FCC, was to write a plan to bring high-speed internet and all of its benefits to all Americans. And as the FCC chairman, Julius Genachowski, would say, broadband is our generation's major infrastructure challenge. It's like, and this harkens back to what Tom Gahul was saying earlier today, it's like the roads, the canals, the railroads, and telephones for previous generations. And historically, it is taking years, even generations, for people with disabilities to have anything close to equal access to communications. I mean, think of the telephone. It was invented, it took 100 years before people who were deaf had relay services that enabled them to use the service. Think of television. It took over 50 years to have captions. Or if you're hard of hearing and you're using a hearing aid and wanted to use a digital wireless phone, it took 10 years to catch up. If you're blind today, you still have a hard time using a basic cell phone. And we still don't have video descriptions used mainstream in most video presentations we have over the web or on TV or anywhere else. And designers of equipment and services and networks have, you know, just often failed to consider accessibility in the issues of design and development. And we know that retrofit solutions are very expensive and inefficient. So, you know, with broadband, with this great communications infrastructure challenge, we have the opportunity to consider accessibility issues early in the deployment process and enable people with disabilities, including people with cognitive disabilities, to share fully in the benefits of broadband. New technologies and innovations can bridge gaps for people with disabilities and provide opportunities that were inconceivable in the past. Because broadband can allow people with disabilities to live independent lives in their communities of choice. Broadband allows people with disabilities to telecommute or run a business out of their home. Broadband can make telerehabilitation services possible, provide long-term health care and vocational support to clients in their home communities. And broadband can also allow access to self-paced online education classes and digital books that can be read aloud and enlarged, turned into Braille, or spotlighted or read aloud simultaneously. And broadband can also allow people to use video phones to communicate or develop an independent online community and culture that is not dependent on interpreting nonverbal and social cues. We had a very interesting brown bag lunch during lunch, and someone made the point, well, we just want to make sure that we're not so involved in technology that we miss the whole point of human contact. And let me just say that I wholeheartedly agree with that comment, that technology should be used to supplement and help enable and foster human relationships and contact, not to serve as a replacement for that. And I think it's something that we need to keep in mind as well. But in order to realize the potential for broadband for people with disabilities, we have to address the barriers that are clearly there. Because devices and services and software and content are often not accessible to people with disabilities. Assistive technologies are sometimes very expensive. They're not interoperable with the latest technologies, and they're difficult to find or repair. And people with disabilities often do not get the training and support they need to use broadband technologies and services. So how can we address these barriers? How can we make sure that people with disabilities, including cognitive disabilities, have full access to today's and tomorrow's technologies? First, people with disabilities have to be fully engaged in the work that we're doing. When we were working on the National Broadband Plan, we held a town hall meeting, an all-day workshop with panels and a policy roundtable, a field event, and a policy conference that was co-sponsored by Silicon Flatirons, the American Association for People with Disabilities, and the Information Technology Innovation Foundation. And participants in these events represented people with a wide range of disability community. And we heard not only from the communities with whom we have worked for years, people in the deaf community and hard of hearing community and blind and low vision communities, we heard powerful testimony from a person with an intellectual disability whose job depended on her being able to use broadband. We heard from people who use wheelchairs about the difficulty they have navigating in some of the community computing centers. And we heard from someone with autism about how much easier it is for him to understand captioned online content. And we use new media tools to enable us to communicate and get feedback from people from all over the globe. And hearing these stories and spreading these stories is making a difference. The actress Marlee Matlin testified at one of our field hearings that she was really distressed that after working a generation ago to bring captions to television programming, so that defined that so much of the programming on the web is not accessible. And she told us she was particularly upset when she could not watch herself on Dancing with the Stars on ABC's website. And this is a true story. So what we did is we posted a post of her testimony, and then someone in the blogosphere forwarded the post to Disney, who owns ABC. And so Disney quickly made the commitment to caption all of their online programming, including their live programming. And in February of this year, I'm really happy to say they followed through on that commitment. And open and inclusive processes that tap into these new ideas and new sources of innovation, they just make better policy. And we think that the policies in the broadband plan reflect these better processes. And we had 3 main broad umbrellas of recommendations in the National Broadband Plan. And I'm happy to say that there's been progress on each of the 3 recommendations. First, the plan recommended that the executive branch form a broadband accessibility working group. And one of the key things that we recommended was to make sure that the government itself was a model of accessibility, and that it takes its own accessibility obligations under Section 504 and 508 that Tom was talking about this morning, that takes it seriously and that it buys accessible technologies and provides the public accessible materials. And the White House announced in July that it was forming a CIO working group just to focus on this issue alone. And the plan also stated that the government should consider providing some public funding for cloud computing and other platforms that would allow people to pull the accessibility features that they need to use the internet out of the cloud anytime and anywhere. That this is an issue that was worthy of consideration. And so we're very happy that Sue Swenson's Interagency Council on Disability Research has taken an interest in convening government-wide meetings on this topic. Second, the plan recommended that the FCC form an accessibility and innovation initiative to promote collaborative problem solving among all the diverse stakeholders that are involved in these issues. And as part of this initiative, first of all, we're participating here today. You're on our calendar on our website. But we're going to be holding field events and collaborative dialogues and challenges. And in July, this coming July, the chairman's going to be awarding an award for advancements in accessibilities. This Accessibility and Innovation Initiative is led by Pam Gregory right here and Jamal Mazrui back over there, who are here today, obviously. And just a few minutes, Pam and Clayton and Greg will be talking about an exciting partnership that the FCC, the Coleman Institute, and Raising the Floor will be undertaking. Third, the National Broadband Plan recommended that Congress and the FCC modernize accessibility laws and regulations. The plan endorsed a specific piece of then pending legislation that would apply rules to IP-enabled communications and video programming technologies. This legislation is perhaps the most important disability legislation since the ADA. And the terrific news is that President Obama just signed this into law on October 8th. It's just a very exciting time. And we're going to be extremely busy at the FCC implementing its provisions. The statutory deadlines are tight, and Chairman Janikowski and longtime accessibility advocate who recently rejoined the commission this year, Karen Pelt-Strauss, are marshaling resources from all over the commission to get this done. And finally, I want to address what we should be doing to be making the vision of cloud computing and accessibility a reality. As I think you can probably gather from my remarks, there's a lot of momentum behind accessibility and technology now. This is a real opportunity to promote policies that will benefit people with disabilities, including those with cognitive disabilities. And we have to work together so that policymakers can understand the benefits of cloud computing for people with cognitive disabilities. We need to break this down into manageable pieces so they can understand it. We need to start with pilot programs that can show its benefit. And the technologists and the advocates and all the stakeholders have to work together to make a compelling case. And I know that there is a compelling case. I'm a parent of a 13-year-old son who is on the autism spectrum and has multiple learning disabilities. My son also has a lot of determination and he loves to learn. Not as much as he loves to play wiffle ball in the Wii, but he still loves to learn, and he's very curious about the world around him. And it's been magical to watch him connect to and relate to others after really being unable to do so when he was younger. I see technology help his life every day. Learning in a large classroom is extremely difficult for him, but he can learn online from BrainPop, and technology helps him show what he knows. AlphaSmart is a lot easier for him to deal with than a pencil and paper. So it really doesn't take a leap of faith for me to envision how cloud computing could help my son. I can imagine his being able to pull down a math coach to help him work through a multi-step algebra problem. And I can imagine his being able to pull down a social skills coach to navigate a challenging social situation. And I can imagine the benefit of his being able to use a wireless device or computer that instantly understood his preferences and his abilities instead of vice versa. And it conformed to his needs instead of vice versa. So I urge all of you to seize this moment and build on the very real momentum that you are all a part of. Share your stories and share your visions. Help others to imagine a world in which technology can tap into talents and abilities that would otherwise go unnoticed. Pam Gregory, Clayton Lewis, and Greg Vanderheiden will be discussing one of the ways in which we would like to spur others to share their visions. And before I turn this over to them, I would like to reiterate my thanks to the Coleman Institute for bringing us all together to learn from each other and to propel this movement forward. And now I'm very happy to turn this over to my colleague, Pam Gregory. Pam and I have worked together for years. She was the first leader of the Disability Rights Office at the FCC 10 years ago. She has a long background in disability that spans over 20 years. And I was so excited when she said that she would lead the new Accessibility and Innovation Initiative. So I just really want to welcome her, and I'm glad that she's here.
Thanks, Elizabeth. Elizabeth is a very dear colleague of mine, and I'm really proud to call her a friend, a personal friend. And Greg's up here. I am going to start with a framework, a little bit of framework. First of all, I want Jamal Mazrui to stand up. Jamal, I don't know where you are. Can you stand up and stay up for a second so people can see you? Jamal Mazrui is the deputy of the Accessibility and Innovation Initiative, and he is a powerhouse in terms of information, resources, and actually just pure brain power. He's a pleasure to work with, and we're so lucky to have him be part of the leadership of the initiative. And it's also very timely that your conference is on partnerships as we start a new partnership here. And I wanted to thank the Coleman Institute for having us here. It's been a real honor. We've learned so much. Clayton, yesterday's workshop was phenomenal. It's probably the best choreographed conference that I've been to in terms of speakers and content and continuity. It was really beautiful, and so you really did a great job in organizing that, and everyone from the Coleman Institute. So Elizabeth talked about the Accessibility and Innovation Initiative, and this is something that's brand new at the FCC. It was recommended in the National Broadband Plan, and it was one of the first things that the Chairman Janikowski adopted as chairman. So he set up this Accessibility and Innovation Initiative, and it's a different modality, it's a different way of thinking. And it's also addressing technologies that we don't regulate. We may never regulate. I mean, that's not up to us. But it's a way to get people together from different stakeholders together, cross-disciplinary disciplinary backgrounds together to think and come up with solutions. We're going to do this through workshops, such as today, field events, facilitated dialogues, challenges, our online tools, and we're going to be thinking outside the box. Our charge is to look at ways to get things done that the Commission has not normally used. So our compelling value, the quest for compelling value, our value is solutions to access. And I'm one of these lucky people who actually just loves my job. I am inspired each and every day by my job and the work and the people that I am lucky enough to work with. And many times I'm just amazed by the resources of that we have at the commission. But at the same time, we know that there are different ways of doing things, and we have to think differently to get things done. And outside of the commission, we know that there are other people with brilliant ideas, and we want to include them in our decision-making process to come up with better ways of doing things. We know that there's a world of possibility out there, and the field of contribution is enormous. So I was thinking, before I came to the conference, I know there's a lot of people I've met at this conference, but before I came to the conferences, I thought, here's just, off the top of my head, here's some geniuses I know. Dale Hatfield, Clayton Lewis, Greg Vanderheiden, Preston Padden, Elizabeth Lyle, and of course Jamal Mazrui. And I'm sure everyone in this room can list off the top of their head 5, 6, 7 geniuses that you're lucky enough to have in your life. And so what we want to do is we want to liberate that genius in everyone. And through the Accessibility and Innovation Initiative, we know that we are going to have to turn our eyes and ears and all of our senses on to all of these ideas and be ready to learn and process things in different ways. There's a quote by Dr. Alan Gregerman, and he's written a book that I really like. It's called Surrounded by Geniuses. And he said the real genius is an ability to see things differently than others and to put things together in a different way. And I think that resonates with me, and I hope it resonates with some of you out there too. So why not expand our world, the FCC world of genius, by letting other people in and becoming part of the process? One way we want people to participate and help in this process is to stay informed. We have a listserv, access info at fcc.gov, and this is a way to keep informed of everything we have going on at the FCC. So I mentioned earlier one of the things that the Accessibility and Innovation Initiative was going to be doing is launching challenges. And so today we're here to launch a challenge. And it's called Lifted by the Cloud, Visions of Cloud-Enhanced Accessibility. And so we want people to share their vision of cloud computing and how it can create opportunities for people with disabilities. And what we're asking for is a multimedia presentation, a video or some other kind of multimedia presentation that demonstrates, that shows and inspires us of what's possible using the computing and communications power that's available via the internet. So we want you to communicate your vision. And so we've come up with some rules for this challenge. And one thing that's actually very exciting is this is the first, there was a new platform called challenge.gov that was actually launched last month. And this is the first FCC challenge to be launched on the challenge.gov platform. So it's actually on the web, and it starts tomorrow. It ends May 1st. The reason why we have that is because we want students to participate and maybe take this on as a project. We're having public voting. Whoever wins publicly is going to be the popular choice. Entry criteria, you can use any combination that you want. We want something 3 to 5 minutes, no longer than 7 minutes, and we want it to be accessible. This is just more information on how to submit your vision. And one thing that the FCC is going to do is the FCC is going to pick a vision and use that vision and promote that vision by putting it up on our webpage. And we're also going to consider it for one of the chairman's awards. The chairman has an annual award on advancement in accessible technology. And so one of the winners will be considered for that national award. which is a very, very big honor. So now I'm going to ask Clayton and ask him to press the down button for the next slide.
Gee, I wonder what it says. Thank you, Pam. Those of you that were at the conference last year will recall that the Institute established a recognition process to promote student projects in technology for people with cognitive disabilities. So we're delighted to be able to expand that recognition process to mesh with what Pam just outlined. So we'll be updating our website to have an additional recognition that is aligned with all of the eligibility conditions for the FCC, the Challenge.gov challenge. But what we will do is to look at all of the entries. We'll be participating in the judging for the challenge, and what we'll be looking for is entries that really address the interests of people with cognitive disabilities, and we will recognize the best of those entries by a special $1,000 award. So we're delighted to be participating in this new program, as is, now does Greg press the down arrow too? Okay.
I wonder what it says.
Thank you for making this cognitively simple to handle this technology. Raising the Floor is a coalition of individuals and organizations whose goal is to try to ensure that people who face barriers due to disability, literacy, or aging have full access to the internet regardless of their economic resources. And so we have, again, joined with the FCC and Coleman in trying to recognize the creative powers of young individuals in the area. Our $1,000 prize will be for those, the best entry that addresses the needs of people in developing countries or people without resources. So a vision for how cloud computing can help bring accessibility to these groups of underserved and unserved individuals. Thank you.
So this is very, very exciting for us at the Commission, and I hope that this is good news for you all, that the Commission is no longer doing business in its same old way. We're looking for non-traditional, exciting, innovative ideas, and our door is always open.
Thank you, Pam.
Yeah, one thing I wanted to mention that I'm not sure it came through, and so I want to emphasize it, and that is because what we're talking about in this case, and often when you hear this, we're talking about things that are challenges for programmers and people like this. And this one is actually a challenge to all individuals. You do not have to have any kind of programming experience, because the question is, have a vision, get together with some people, make up some multimedia that will describe it. And so this contest, unlike many that talk about technology and disability, doesn't have to do with technologists. It has to do with all of us in the entire community getting together and talking about putting our heads together and trying to figure out what the vision would look like. And so we want to emphasize that so that the word gets out not just to the technology type people, but to all of the media, all of the clinical types, all of the families and people with disabilities themselves. What's your vision? Thanks.
Thank you. I'd also like to thank Elizabeth Lyle for her very inspiring remarks a few minutes ago. Thank you, Elizabeth.